Good evening, ghoulies and ghosties and long-leggedy beasties. This is Alex, coming at you from the underworld, and welcome back to another episode of... Before I get started, I just want to say I'm sorry I didn't do a video last weekend. I know I said in advance that I wasn't going to do one anyway because I had some projects I needed to make leadway on, but at the same time I thought to myself that if I had some downtime, I would do a top 3 video and upload it as a surprise. However, the downtime I had was used doing some reflection and also just some self-care, because there was a tragedy that happened earlier in the week that made me become a little triggered in regards to my own past, which that tragedy was an acquaintance killed himself on Facebook Live. And I didn't know him well, but I had met him before through the convention circuit, and he was very sweet, very caring, very funny, and I know he will be missed. Now, as far as the people who were on Facebook Live with him, just know that you are being thought of. My heart is with you. I'm hoping every day you improve and grow stronger. And I think we just ought to remember the good things that he did in life. Now, I will say that I had been off of social media for a little bit because I also heard that the video went viral. And after Facebook had removed it, it had popped up on other platforms. And I just did not want to be surfing through a platform and have the video pop up. So I just stayed away from social media. And my request to you is, if you see this video or a video where a person has ended their life, please report that video to the platform where it's being shown, because the thing is, that was a human being. That was someone who people loved and most likely still love. And another person's tragedy should not be our entertainment. We should not want to see tragedy in a person's life. We should hope that they are resting in peace and their loved ones are finding peace, versus just sharing a video around of a person at the lowest point in their life. So if you see something like that, please have it removed out of respect for the person who has passed away, as well as out of the respect for their loved ones. And if you are an individual who is suicidal or you have PTSD, I have provided some links in the description section of this video, so you can use a few phone numbers there to try to get yourself some help. And coming from an individual who had attempted suicide, I can wholeheartedly say that suicide is never the answer. Yeah, the day might suck, the week might suck, but you know what? Life can continue and it can improve. You can just grow and learn from what's going on, and you can make your life better from that. Now, you should not feel like the burden should all be on you, because a lot of people cannot do this on their own. I know when I attempted suicide, I thought it was because I had no sources that could help me beyond that point, but in all honesty, there were. And you just have to be willing to say, you know what, I can't do this alone, I need help. And help is out there. So just know, suicide is never the answer. Life can continue and get better. And I just honestly hope that you choose life over death. So with that said, let's go on and get down to the video for this weekend. But before I do, I'm just going to put some positive vibes out there. Positive vibes from me to you. Just putting that out there. And as far as this weekend's video is concerned, I'm not doing a book review. I'm actually doing something I've wanted to do for quite some time, which I've never had the opportunity until now. But about 2 weeks ago, the fabulous booktuber by the name of Harpies in the Trees tagged me in the Spoopy Booktag challenge. And if you're not subscribed to Harpies in the Trees, you really need to, because her channel kicks ass. Like, she focuses on books that are supernatural and paranormal based in her book reviews. So if you're wanting to expand that subgenre of literature, then she is totally the go-to for that. And to make this easy, I have provided a link to her YouTube page in the description section of this video. So all you have to do is just click that link and subscribe to her channel, and you're good to go. Now, if you're wondering what the Spoopy Booktag Challenge is, from my understanding, it was created by Booktuber. And this is a collection of 13 questions that poses to horror readers about specific books. And I thought that this was going to be a lot of fun, which it was, but I also thought it was going to be very easy, which it wasn't. And even though I had fun compiling the books, I honestly was like just really thinking long and hard about some of the questions and what book would fit that question. And there were times where I'm like, well, this book could go here, here, and here. So I didn't want to do the same book again and again. And that's where a lot of deep thought came in for this questionnaire. So I did have a lot of fun doing it. It did take some time to get the books together, but without me rambling any further, let's go in and see the list that I've compiled with the questions in regards to the Spoopy Booktag Challenge. First question: a book that scared you while you were actively reading the words on the pages. Well, this was a no-brainer because I grabbed The House of Leaves by Mark Z. Danielewski. And this book scared the ever-loving living hell out of me. Like, there were times where I was reading this at night and I had to put it down and finish it in the day. And the thing is, the concept here is so simple because the book is about a house that's bigger on the inside than it is on the outside. And that just sounds like strange fiction, right? Well, by the way the book is constructed, it really messed with my equilibrium and it disoriented me, which at the same time we're presented with some very frightening psychological aspects to this book. And mixing all of that together really just did a number on my brain. And also there's a part in this book where you have to decode a message, and while I was decoding that, I was just completely horrified. But overall, this is the scariest book I've ever read. It's the only book that I had to put down because I needed daylight in order to finish it. And truth be it, it does for books what the Blair Witch Project did for movies. Question 2. A book you didn't find scary while reading it, but after you had the time to sit and think about it, you became frightened, scared, or creeped out. I selected When Darkness Loves Us by Elizabeth Engstrom. This book is so twisted and it's so disturbing, but there's like zero to no blood in it. And what happens here is we have two stories in this book, which they're both good, but the first one is named the same as the book title, and that's the one that really affected me. Now, with the opening story, it's focused on a pregnant girl who gets lost in this underground tunnel system, and she becomes trapped down there while she's pregnant. So that's pretty much the story. But what happens is it becomes extremely psychological. It becomes extremely intense, and it's also very claustrophobic. Now, as I was reading this, I did feel it was disturbing, and the ending of it was very impactful because it made me feel like this was an origin story for something much more sinister. And even though I wasn't frightened by it as soon as I finished it, about a week or so later, I was still thinking about this story and talking about it. And the more I thought about it and talked about it, the more horrifying and frightening I realized it was, because it feels like something that could really happen. And when it boils down to a scenario that could really happen, that's when it hits the core of my fear. Number 3, a book that was so creepy that you still think about a scene from it years later. I selected Geralds Game by Stephen King. Now, I read this when I was about 13 years old, and after reading this, I decided I was never going to try bondage a day in my life. Like, no one is ever going to tie me down or cuff me down to a bed, because after reading this, that ship done sailed. But if you've never read this before, pretty much it's about a married couple who decide to spice up their love life in a cabin in the middle of nowhere. However, once the husband cuffs his wife to the bed, she has a change of mind, so she kicks him in the junk and he falls back, hits his head, and pretty much dies. So this leaves her cuffed to the bed. Well, as she's there, all of these things start to happen, such as there's a maniac loose, and also there's a starved dog that's come into the house. So you have a lot going on, plus there's also the reflection of her childhood and her suffering through a lot of personal demons. So there's really a lot of psychology and action to this book. But the one scene that still just gets to me, and I'm sure you know what I'm talking about if you've read this book, but the ending scene is just, it's gross. It's so gross, and it's so cringeworthy. Like, even though the last time I read this I was a teenager, I still remember just how skin crawling it was, and it just, Number 4. A book that you couldn't finish because it was either too creepy or too gory. Pretty much I'm a seasoned horror fan, so I'm here for the creepiness and the gore, so not finishing a book because it was one thing or the other in that aspect, that's just not heard of. Now, I will quit reading a book if it sucks, and that's happened a few times in my life, but it totally is not because it was too creepy or too gory. So because of this, I looked over the books I have, and I decided to pick one of my favorites, which I imagine quite a few people probably have quit reading it. But this is called Haunted by Chuck Palahniuk. And in this you have about, a good handful of stories that are fairly disturbing. Sometimes they feel like dark comedies, other times they're just disturbing for disturbing's sake, and a few of these do actually feel like horror stories. But the introduction story is perhaps the most grotesque out of this entire book, which that one is called Guts. And the story is about a young boy who decides to experiment with a sex act, and it goes horribly wrong. Now, rumor has it when Chuck Palahniuk read the story Guts to a few audiences, people actually left throwing up. So that has my seal of approval already. And me being the kind of bastard I am, whenever I have a friend who wants to have their limits pushed, I'll read them the story Guts just to see how long it takes them before they start heaving. And truth be it, I feel like the story is a great rite of passage. Number 5. The scariest or creepiest book you've read based on a cult or group of people with sinister values and goals. For this, I had to select Harvest Home by Thomas Tyron. This is honestly one of my favorite books. It feels like a good old-fashioned American Gothic horror story, and it's also a slow burner that just piles on the creepiness until it becomes a full-fledged nightmare. Now, with this, we have a family who moves from New York to this quaint little New England village because they want to get away from the hectic life and bring it down so they can just live simple. And as they become acquainted with the town and its customs, they discover that there's this big celebration called Harvest Home. And even though it seems like a folk festival, they discover that it's a ceremony that's deeply seated in superstition and old custom, which some of those old customs tend to be pretty bloodthirsty. So this is a book that if you enjoyed movies like The Wicker Man or Midsummer, you would most likely enjoy this as well. And I feel like it's the perfect read for the fall months because, of course, that's when the book takes place. Number 6. A horror book that takes place in another worldly location. Pretty much, I'm really not a fan of fantasy. And that's kind of what I think about when I read this question here. It just kind of reminds me of something where world building is involved. And I honestly just don't get into those kind of books. However, I am a huge fan of Clive Barker, and I've read just about everything he's written. So I would really have to consider that he's great at world building. And as far as kind of bridging that gap between horror and fantasy, he would totally be a go-to author for that. So for that reason, I selected Tortured Souls. And this was originally released in 6 parts when the Tortured Souls toy line had come out. And even though I do believe this does take place on Earth, like maybe some part of Earth, It is so fantasy-based that I really believe we're on a different planet. And also at the same time, this kind of feels like what would happen if Hellraiser met a fantasy landscape. So what we have here is a story that focuses on this ancient deity who can transform people into these nightmarish things so they can have their revenge. And the story does become somewhat political and spiritual at the same time, but it doesn't beat the reader over the head. Question number 7. A horror book where the main characters have to do something horrific in order to do what they deem as right or necessary. So this book is not going to be for everyone because it is an extreme horror novel and it does not hold anything back whatsoever. So if you are easily triggered in regards to sexual abuse, I highly recommend that you do not read this book. But for this number, Survivor by J.F. Gonzalez is very suitable. And this is a book about a woman who's been kidnapped by a snuff production team and she is to star in their new snuff film. Well, while they have her captured, she concocts a plan where she offers up a mother and baby in her place. So this is out of hopes that she can trick the snuff production team into going for the mother and baby, but before the team can actually kidnap them, she and the mother and baby can run off and get help. And needless to say, things don't go as planned. But for that question, Survivor by J.F. Gonzalez is the best I got. Number 8, a favorite horror book that takes place in the summer. In my opinion, Shirley Jackson is the queen of summer-related horror stories, and for this reason, I'm picking The Haunting of Hill House. Now, every time I read this, it feels like I've gone on a little summer getaway, and everything around me is beautiful with life. The hills, the trees, everything's just beautiful. However, in the middle of all that, we have Hill House that sits like a sore thumb because it was born bad. And what we have here is a professor who decides that he's going to do some paranormal experiments within the home, and even though him and the people he's selected to do these experiments are to stay in the home for the entirety of 3 months, they only last no more than 1 week. So this is something that I feel was really a good psychological slow burner. It's something that scared the hell out of me, and I've read it a few times. Each time I've read it, it's always been in the summer, so automatically it's a go-to. Number 9, a horror book that felt like you were actually watching or reading the script for a classic horror movie. For this, I selected The Ballad of Black Tom by Victor LaValle. Now, I recently read this for the first time last Black History Month, and I enjoyed it so much I included the rest of his books in my to-be-read pile. So I do look forward to reading those, and with this book in particular, when I was reading it, it honestly felt like I was watching a noir crime drama, but it just so happened to have a cult, a massacre, and Cthulhu in it, so that was really awesome. And by how everything is crafted, it just really harkened my mind back to just that age-old cinematic appearance. So, if you haven't read this, the book is about a street hustler by the name of Black Tom, and after a racial injustice happens, he decides to summon Cthulhu for his advantage. And truth be it, after what he goes through, I honestly can't blame the character because I would be feeling the exact same thing. And even though this does have a strong social message to it, it doesn't beat the reader over the head. Now, one of the things that I found most interesting about this book is it shows what happens when a Black creator takes on Lovecraft. Number 10, a modern book that's not afraid to use modern technology such as mobile phones, internet, social media, robotics, etc. Even though this book is just a little dated, it still holds up for the time that it is. So I selected Heart-Shaped Box by Joe Hill. And when this was first released, I kind of held off on it a little bit because it sounded cheesy. I mean, in a nutshell, it's about a guy who buys a ghost off of the internet. And I was just like, all right, well, that sounds hokey. It sounds really campy, which I like those subjects, but I just didn't know if I wanted to devote that much time to something that could be cheesy. So I did buy the book and I sat on it a while, and then when I finally did read it, I couldn't put it down, and it was actually pretty creepy. Now, what I really enjoyed so much about this is Joe Hill takes the modern day consumer, and instead of them buying a haunted object inside of an old antique shop, he brings it to the online platform where the consumer purchases a haunted item off of the internet. And truth be it, this really isn't too far-fetched because, like, you can go to eBay right now and buy haunted items. However, I would not suggest doing that because you never really know what you're getting. Number 11, a horror book that was written before the year 2000 that you felt was ahead of its time. I kind of had to dig a little bit here, and I really went beyond the year 2000. So I snagged The Manitou by Graham Masterton, which was like written in around the 70s, somewhere about there. But pretty much, this is a really good knockoff of The Exorcist, and it falls into that whole possession subgenre of horror, which in this concept, we have a woman who becomes possessed by an ancient medicine man. And this comes about because she gets a boil on the back of her neck, and when that boil pops, the reincarnated medicine man is reborn. And in this scenario, we have two protagonists. One is a con artist who poses as a psychic, and another one is a modern-day medicine man. And instead of them using like archaic symbols such as a cross or anything like that to banish the evil, they turn to modern day technology, which is a computer. So I really feel like that was before its time for the decade this was written in, because I imagine a lot of people at that time felt like technology was evil and it was going to take their jobs. So we have that fear, but with this book, it really gives the idea that technology is our friend. So I really felt it was suitable for that number. Number 12. A book that you feel greatly changed or influenced the horror genre for years to come. Personally, I had to pick The Exorcist by William Peter Blatty. Now, this book was a game changer. I mean, never before had a demon receive such personality in a horror book, and because of this, we really saw that just about everything that came out afterwards was dubbed just as frightening as The Exorcist, or just as shocking as The Exorcist. And of course, we do have other books like Rosemary's Baby and The Other, but this is among the top 3 granddaddies that just changed it all. And of course, I don't have to explain what this book's about because you've either read it or seen the movie. But I honestly believe that even to this day, we are still seeing the influences of this work in the subgenre of possession horror. Number 13, a horror book that is so unique that you've yet to come across anything like it. So, I am not a fan of modern-day Dean Koontz, but I do like his older books. And when this was released, False Memory, I grabbed it upon its release, which I think I was maybe like 12 or 13 at the time when this came out. But I remember reading it, and ever since then, I've never seen anything else like it. Which the concept is you have people who wake up with phobias. And like one day they're fine, the next day they wake up and bam, they have a phobia. And what goes down with this is actually kind of shocking at times. And it's just very unique and original. And I've never seen this done before, and I have not seen it done after. So this is perhaps one of the final Dean Koontz books that I really enjoyed, and it's something that I do plan to revisit. Well, those are my answers, and I hope you enjoy the list that I provided. If you're interested in reading any of the books I spoke of, those are all available in print, ebook, and audio, so getting your hands on a copy is not hard to do. Also, I would like to say thank you to Harpies in the Trees once again, because I had wanted to do this challenge for quite some time, and when I saw that I had been tagged, it truly brightened my day, so thank you so very much. And also, I know that a lot of booktubers have already done this challenge, so I don't necessarily know who to tag, but the challenge is something I want to keep going. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, if you have been a booktuber for at a year at the very least, I challenge you to do the Spoopy Booktag challenge. And for a quick reference, all of the questions are in the description section of this video. So I really look forward to your answers. And with that said, it's time to go in and close out, which I would like to say thank you to Lisa G and Melody Romeo, which Melody Romeo writes fantasy and historic fantasy books. So if you would like to check out her work, it's available in ebook and print wherever books are sold. And if you're wondering why I'm giving a shout out to these wonderful people, it's because they've been awesome enough to contribute to my Patreon page, and I have 2 different tiers available if you would like to contribute as well. One tier is $5 a month, which I'll give you a shout out at the end of my videos for that. And another tier is $10, where I'll give you that same shout out, but at the same time, at the beginning of every month, I'll send you over a photo, which I do creepy photography on the side. And when I send that to you, you're welcome to print it off and do whatever you like with it. So if you're able to contribute to my Patreon, that's awesome. If not, no sweat whatsoever. I just hope you return to this channel so we can continue to have fun. And if you have not subscribed, be sure to subscribe and hit that notifications bell because I have more videos coming in the near future. Also, if you would like to connect with me on social media such as Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or TikTok, all of the links for those are in the description section as well. So, until we see each other again, I hope you have a wonderful week and sweet nightmares.